Thank the Kerr family for asking me to come here tonight and speak about Steve. It's a true honor to do so. He was a dear friend of mine growing up. And it feels good standing up here at a Hall of Fame ceremony. Because in high school I was a strapping 5'4", 140 pounds, one sport athlete. And that consisted of being the starting third base coach of the baseball team. That was a good one, though. So obviously this is as close as I'm ever going to get to a podium at a Hall of Fame. So thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Kerr. When you speak about a Hall of Fame, you speak about what kind of person it takes to become a Hall of Famer. I think we all have kind of the same attributes in mind, and it obviously starts with athleticism. And anyone who saw Steve play or played against him or coached for him knows that he had plenty of that. Growing up in Beverly, I think by far he was the most versatile athlete that I ever saw. And it wasn't just high school. It didn't matter what we were playing. You know, it could have been wiffle ball, street hockey, beach volleyball. We used to play tackle football every day after school when we went to Memorial Junior High. And Andrew Morency was going to be up here next. He was a regular at that game. Who the hell knew we were running around with two Hall of Famers back then? But it didn't matter what the sport. Steve was usually the best one out there. And if he wasn't the best one, if he wasn't the most skilled at that sport, his raw athletic ability allowed him to dominate. And I remember in that tackle football game, I was always glad when I was on his team because I was going to get tackled by him. And secondly, because we were probably going to win. He was the type of kid that could play any sport. And Coach Chamber, I wish we could have got the shoulder pads and a helmet on him because he would have had a heck of a flank or a free safety on your hands if we could have got him in football. But growing up, Steve's best sport was basketball. And that was for a couple of reasons. First of all, it was in his blood. His father, Bob, was a great player back in his day, and from what I understand, he played well into his 40s. And secondly, it was his brother Bobby's sport. And Steve always tried to emulate Bobby, both as an athlete and a person. He was also a great basketball player because he could jump. I mean, the kid was a springboard. He had legs. People that use the phrase, he could jump out of the gym, you're talking about Steve. And that also had a lot to do with Bobby, too, because people used to ask Steve all the time, where'd you learn how to jump like that? And he'd always very proudly tell them, my older brother Bobby told me when I was a young kid, that if I wanted to be a good basketball player, and if I wanted to jump high, I should jump a lot of rope. And apparently he took that advice to heart, because the kid, his legs were like springs. It was incredible. So it was really no surprise to see Steve do well in basketball in high school. But lacrosse was a different story. Steve played baseball as a freshman. He was our starting shortstop on the freshman team. For some reason, before his sophomore year, he decided to pick up a lacrosse stick. And it turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to him, and one of the best things that ever happened to the Beverly High lacrosse program. Lacrosse was a perfect sport for Steve. He could do it all. But I talked to a couple of his teammates when I was putting the speech together, and I asked them about Steve, and they said, you know, one comment stuck out to me the most. Steve was more than just a kid that had wheels, that could run, and had good stick skills. He was a fierce competitor. He inspired confidence, he was tough, and he never backed down from anybody. And a perfect example of that, if you were there back in Hertz Stadium, it was during his senior year, he was at Division II state semifinals. They were playing Hingham, and Steve and Dan Schiff, who's here tonight, two incredible offensive players, were leading the team. It was a tough game, and it was early in the third quarter. Steve took a stick to the throat. Knocked him out of the game. He missed almost the entire third quarter. But he came back and he scored 2 goals in 21 seconds. Led Beverly to a 9-8 victory, which at the time was probably the biggest win in Beverly High lacrosse history. Another one of Steve's teammates told me he literally willed us to a victory that day. But like all the people who are being honored here tonight, Steve was much more than simply a gifted athlete. He was a great teammate, as well as a great friend. And with Steve, it was never about how many points he scored or how many goals he scored. It was never about the individual stuff. It was always about the team. It was always about his friends. We went to college together out of Westfield State, and I remember it was our sophomore year. We lived together in the dorm room, and it was early in the lacrosse season, and I went home for the weekend. And I got back on Sunday night, I came in the room, and Steve was sitting there at his desk studying, as he always was. And I said, hey, how'd the weekend go? It's good. I said, how'd the lacrosse team do? They had a couple games that weekend. And he said, we did all right. We split. We won one game. We lost one game. I said, how'd you play? I said, I played pretty good. It's all right. Put my bags down, went down the hall to use the restroom that we all shared on that floor. And before I got out of my door down in the restroom, like 4 or 5 of the guys we lived with on the dorm stopped me. Said, did you hear about Steve? Did you hear about Steve? No, what happened? He scored 15 goals this weekend, 2 games. It was unbelievable. You should have saw him. And you didn't mention that. So I get back to the room. I said, hey, failed to mention he scored 15 goals this weekend. And he just looked up with that smile of his and he said, I told you I played pretty good. That was Steve. That's what he was like. When Steve passed away back in 1989, it was an extremely tough time for all of us who were close to him. You know, you're 19, you're 20 years old, you're home from college for the summer. Life was pretty good. And then all of a sudden you come home and your parents sit you down and tell you that one of your best friends has died in a car accident. And it's tough. But as difficult as it was for myself and all of Steve's friends, I think it served as a life lesson for all of us. It taught us how fragile life can be. It taught us how important friendship is. And it taught us that in tough times, you really need to lean on your friends and your family to get you through. One thing I'll always remember about the days and the weeks and the years that have passed since Steve passed away is how strong the Kerrs were. I've been fortunate enough to stay in touch with the Kerr family, and I know it must be tough for them every time they see myself and all Steve's friends. I know they must be thinking, what would Steve be doing with his life if he was still with us? But through it all, they always greet me with a big hug, a big smile. They want to know how I'm doing. They want to know how my family is. They want to know how the rest of the gang's doing. And they're just great people. And unfortunately for the Kerrs, they've suffered through a few other tragedies over the years. As Steve mentioned, their oldest son, Bobby, who was a highly decorated police detective in Florida, passed away in 2004 at the age of 39. And Steve's uncle, Ed Anderson, who, by the way, if any of you knew Ed, if they ever build a sports fan Hall of Fame for Beverly High, he'll be a first ballot inductee. But Ed passed away a couple years after Bobby, and it was a tough time. But through it all, the Kerrs have always handled themselves with grace and class and dignity. And you look back at the kind of role models that Steve had growing up, between his sister Cindy, who was very close to, his brother Bobby, who he idolized, and his parents, Rosalie and Bob. It's really no surprise that he turned out to be the great individual that he was for the 20 years that he was with us. When we got the great news that Steve's Hall of Fame induction and nomination was going to be accepted, and he was going to be inducted tonight, I was talking to Steve's mother, and she said to me, you know, Gary, that night at the ceremony, Steve's going to be looking down at all of us with a big smile on his face. Well, Mrs. Kerr, here we are. So if Steve is out there, and I'm sure he is, looking down on us, I want to tell him, we love you, we miss you. Congratulations, Steve, you're a Hall of Famer. Thank you.